Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson, and welcome to Construction Project Management Tips. Today we're going to be looking at why it's a good idea to think like a tradesperson if you're a project manager or a site superintendent on a construction project. Very often in the construction industry, we have different roles that are played, and different people think in different ways. And I can give you a little example that I ran into over the holidays. My daughter was coming up from the US and she was going to bring her cat with her. And my wife didn't really want the cat running around the kitchen while all the cooking and everything is going on. And so my background, being that I came from a carpentry background, started in a family-run business, learned a lot of things, did a couple of trades, carpentry and brick and stone masonry. You think a little bit differently when you're a tradesperson. And one of the nice things about learning a skill, even if it's for your job, you can transfer a lot of those skills to a lot of different things. For example, if you own a house, you can do a lot of things on that house without having to hire different people. And so I said to my wife, well, sure, no problem. I'll put a door on this opening. And right away, the tradesperson kind of thinking goes into effect. I start thinking about, okay, so how long should this take me? And you start to use your experience of having hung hundreds of doors in my career, many hundreds of doors. How long will this take? And of course, maybe because I haven't hung doors in a few years, I don't have everything sort of set up the way I normally would as a tradesperson. So it might take a little bit longer. But just for a simple doorway, you start thinking very granular, very step by step. And if you're a project manager who's managing a big project, very often you're thinking, the big picture, big pieces of the puzzle and how they fit in. That's why we develop a critical path, master schedule. But it's not that granular till you get closer to the work. And you need to really sort of pick the brains of the tradespeople that are involved in your project because they know a lot more about those little details. For example, this door frame here that I have was an existing door frame. It was never really put in to hang a door in exactly, right? If you're a carpenter, especially when this house was built probably about 60 years ago, and there's not a door that you have to put in, you just make the frame, you make it approximately a standard size, in this case a 2-foot 6-inch wide door, and maybe it's a little bit out of plumb, maybe it's not. I don't have to hang the door, maybe it's not so perfect. So right away I know that it's not going to be a perfect install, that probably it's not plumb, probably it's not square, the head might not be level on the frame. And so I'm going to measure it very carefully and I'm going to look at it. The other thing I had to think about was, well, normally if I was doing a lot of doors, I would you set up a router jig and I would have the jig all set up and boom, 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 boom. Very, very quick, very efficient. But it's been a number of years. My jig wasn't all set up and all that stuff. And so by the time I get that all set up, I probably could have had the door hung using more old school methods, which would be to chisel out where the hinges are to go, right? So basically I started to chisel out where the hinges are to go. I think in the original one you can sort of see the chisel in there, and that's marking out the gain for the chisel. Kind of old school, but because you're a tradesperson, you can think, well, what's the best solution in this particular case to follow? And then if you've done it well, then it should fit in nice and snug, and then you can apply the screws into that in place. Then of course you've got to cut out the doorknob for it, and you've got to fit the latch to the keeper, and you're going to have to install a keeper on this side. And as I mentioned, the door height, well, when this house was built, what was standard was 6-foot 6 high-inch doors, and what's standard today is 6'8". So it means you're going to have to cut off the bottom of the door. So I found that the frame was a little bit narrow. I had to plane off about 3/8 of an inch, and I had to cut off about 2 inches off the bottom of the door. It wasn't quite square, so I had to scribe the door so it would fit nice in the opening. And of course, again, well, now you got to cut out the door on the edge for the hinge, and again, using the hammer and chisel to do that. That's another thing. Another thing I noticed being a tradesperson background is technology's change. I was not expecting this particular French door to be laminated and finger jointed and laminated with masonite on both sides. I was expecting it to be a solid pine door. Of course, the price of pine these days has gone through the roof, especially clear pine. So manufacturers try to find ways to cut costs, and they also prime the door. It comes already primed. I wouldn't even know really, unless I really was looking for it, that this had masonite facing on both sides. But the other thing you have to do is you have to bevel the sides of the door so it'll close more easily, and it's easier to mount the hinges on so it doesn't become hinge mounted, so it shuts effectively. All these little things as a tradesperson goes through your mind ahead of time, and then as you're doing it, if you've done a lot of times, then you're just mapping it out. What's the best steps to do this? Now, you're not drawing a critical path schedule to hang a door, but you are thinking about the steps, and you should be. And then after you've done it, you start thinking about, well, could I have done that a little bit better? Could I have done that a little bit more efficiently? Could I have done that a little bit more effortlessly the next time so it would be easier to hang? And if there are those things, then you start to look at making those continuous improvements. This ties into lean construction thinking. Lean construction thinking ties very well into somebody who is a very, very efficient tradesperson. A lot of that kind of way of thinking of reducing waste, eliminating wasted motion, having organization, 5 S's, where everything is organized, there's a place for everything, everything in its place, becomes very, very important in the process. And you also notice how manufacturers and vendors make things, and how some do things very well and how some don't do things for very well. One of the things that I found, we have supply chain issues right now in the construction industry. Again, so you got to think about, well, what is the whole way that the industry is operating right now? There's a lot of constraints. There's not a lot of availability as there normally is. So I wanted a French door, but I would have preferred a solid pine French door with beveled glass. Typically, French doors, traditionally, they always had beveled glass. Went to Home Depot, went to Central Fairbank, went to Revy, all had the same door, and I'm pretty sure it was from the same manufacturer. So there wasn't a lot of choice. It wasn't I'm sure if I wanted to source one, I could, but I'd probably have to wait, and then it'd be long after Christmas before I get it. So you have to make certain choices and certain compromises in that process. And one of the things I noticed about the manufacturer is, because the door came primed already with the primer on it, that's great, but it had this plastic over it so that the windows wouldn't get paint on it. But you know what? The way they stuck on the plastic, it was really difficult to take the plastic off. You had to cut around it, but it's not like the plastic fell off. It was like glued to the glass. You had to really work it to peel it off, and it made really a mess because the plastic cracked all the paint, because they pretty much painted over all of the plastic when you peeled it off, and you had to do that for both sides. It actually, to be honest, took me longer to actually clean this up and cut out the plastic after I put a finished coat of paint on it myself than it did to hang the door. So these are things that you learn and things that you think about as a tradesperson. As a tradesperson, I'd be thinking, if I was going to hang more of these types of doors, I wouldn't be using this particular manufacturer's product. I'd be looking for a different source that would make the plastic. In the past, where it was on there, plastic was very easy to cut off. You cut it off and it just kind of would come out. So thinking like a tradesperson, it's very granular. Most people would just say, well, I got a door to hang, all right? And most people think, there it is, the door's in, and there's not much steps to it. But there's actually a lot of steps that's involved in that process of hanging a door, making it fit, scribing the top because it was a little bit out to make it actually fit nice and evenly all around the edges. So I think there's a lot that, if you are thinking about being a site superintendent or a project management manager in the construction industry, there's a lot of positive impacts about thinking like a tradesperson. You may not want to be a tradesperson, you may not have been a tradesperson, but if you get opportunities to learn from a tradesperson or to try things on your own with a few tools at home, just to get a little inkling of the way that a tradesperson thinks and understanding that granularity, that level of detail, it's going to make you much more effective at coordinating, scheduling, planning, engaging with the trades to come out with the best possible project on your construction project. So that's what I wanted to convey today. Think like a tradesperson, look at things from their viewpoint, and then integrate that with your project management skills and your project management knowledge. They think very granular, very detailed, very short term. Project managers are very good at the long-term horizons. Site superintendents are good at the shorter to mid-term horizons, but having people think about things from different viewpoints will lead to much more successful projects. So here's for happy engagement involving lean techniques and trades techniques fully integrating into your construction projects. I'm Tom Stevenson, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the subscribe button, leave a comment, click the likes, and we'll see you next time. Let's build this community together. Bye for now.